This is a Blairing Out with Eric Blair show tonight, rocking the red carpet for the Hall of Heavy Metal History. And I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, the guitar virtuoso, Chris Impellitteri.
Wow, thank you, Eric. My ego just swelled big time.
Chris will never forget what was the first Impellitteri record to us, which was the one with Graham Bonnet, the original bass player for Quiet Riot, Chuck Wright. Yep. And then you had Pat Torpey, who's God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore, but you had an all-star, and we were all blown away when that came out.
Yeah, it was a fun record. I remember, I was really young. And so we did our first Impellitteri, we called it the Black EP. That was, I think, 1986. And it kind of cemented who we were. We were definitely a metal band. Our singer had left, and Graham and I were really good friends. He had called me for, I think, to replace Yngwie and Alcatraz before Steve Vai. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I have no singer, what am I going to do? So I said, Graham, I've got a record deal. Do you want to do more like a tribute to Rainbow, what you did, something like that? It's not going to be all, hardcore metal. And he said, yeah. And we just went in. And we just recorded the record, and Pat Torpey was really the magic behind that record. But I look at it years later. We're now in 2020, and I've had I'm not going to name drop, but some insanely big bands come up to me and go, hey, will you sign this album? I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You have this record? I will tell you, like Bon Jovi, bands like that, they all had it, And the record, I will always be grateful. I mean, I love Stand in Line, the song. I'm not a big fan of the record entirely. I love Graham on it, Pat, but I'm a metal kid. That was the kind of record where I thought, oh, Graham, you shined, and I will always be indebted to him because in Japan, we blew up, and sold millions of records.
So you have a new album out on Frontiers.
Yes, it's called The Nature of the Beast. It's Rob Rock on vocals, myself. John Deddy actually played drums, and John had played with Slayer in the past. And then James Pulley, who's our bass player, fantastic. Now touring, we actually been using Patrick Johansson. So that's kind of the story of The Nature of the Beast. And it's definitely a return to more like the Maiden-esque, hence the Beast celebration. And we kind of mixed the technical stuff we do with, more kind of like that British heavy metal sound with more of a modern production.
So what's it like working with Rock?
I gotta be honest, I love Rob. I've been so blessed to work with some amazing singers. I mean, obviously with Graham Bonnet, Graham is, to me, he will always be a legend. And Rob is one of those guys where he doesn't have the notoriety that Graham has, or a Dio, but he has that voice. He's one of those guys where you can play night after night, he could have the flu, and he will still hit the high C sharp, and he'll do just insane notes with consistency, and I just love his voice.
We all know him from the Driver album. I think that was 1986.
Yeah, right before Rudy and Tommy Aldridge joined Whitesnake. They did that record. Tony McAlpine, fantastic guitar player. They did that record, and I loved it, but they just couldn't get major record companies behind it. And eventually Rudy, and I played with Rudy. Rudy told me David offered him a deal they couldn't pass up. Yeah. So,
Whitesnake was one of the biggest bands of the 80s.
Oh, big time. Listen, to me, Sykes is also one of my favorite guitar players. If you listen to the Stand in Line guitar solo, listen to Still of the Night. You'll know kind of what I was trying to do.
How does Frontiers treat you guys?
Well, Frontiers has been very good for us, Frontiers are a very specific type music label. It's hard for them because we're probably a little heavier than most of their bands, but this is also the problem with this band, Impellitteri. People don't really know how to categorize. For years, I've had to listen to people say, we're just a guitar wank fest, shred, Yngwie clone, whatever, all of that silly stuff. It's never been about that. If you listen to our first EP, it's really, we were trying to do in '86 more like Maiden meets Priest on steroids, with more like Al Di Meola guitar playing, and Rob's doing all the screaming stuff like Halford, but then trying to also sound like Dickinson. That was really our foundation of who we wanted to be.
What else is going on with you right now? Do you have any supergroups?
So Graham's doing another Alcatraz record. I think Steve Vai is going to be on it. I just agreed, so I just recorded a song and played on it. So I'm doing stuff like that. I will tell you, I've been really blessed to have a lot of success financially in Japan and other countries, so I've done really well where I can kind of pick and choose, and I've rarely ever stepped out of my own band. In '88, the closest thing I ever got to where I said, all right, I'll do this, was Ozzy and Sharon called me before Zach. They called me many times, and so at that time...
Why did you do that?
Because I had just signed a deal, and it was actually for Stand in Line with Relativity. I remember my attorney, this guy named Peter Paterno at the time. Yeah, Peter does Metallica, all that stuff. I remember he was so mad. I was like, why don't you take the gig? And I was like, well, it's like I was already signed with Relativity. I couldn't legally break that anyways, So, but that was really the closest I'd ever gotten to do anything outside of my own band. You know, I've just been very loyal to it. And people think it's my band, I'm a solo artist. I'm not. It's never been the Chris Impellitteri ego show. It's been 5 guys, different lineups, but each guy, I think, has an equal amount of importance, right? I'm just the guitar player. You know, so that's kind of, you know, what I'm doing. I'm still working on the Impellitteri thing, to get back to your original question. Right now, the idea is to go do more dates, probably go do festivals in Europe, right? Finish that. We may go do some more Asian dates, because outside of Japan, we seem to have this huge following in Korea. And again, we're talking like 30, 40,000 people plus coming to see our shows. So we may do more of that. And then we'll come back and we'll look at, should we make more records, you know?
What does that look like to go out there in Korea and play to 30 to 40,000 people?
The first time we did Korea, I think it was about 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago, and we were doing this thing called the Busan Rock Festival, and we were headlining. And I remember our bass player James, he couldn't go for some reason, so I called up Rudy Sarzo and said, "Hey Rudy, you have a window?" And he goes, "Actually, I do." So Rudy came in and he learned all the music, and I think we spent like 4 days rehearsing for this thing, right? And we get to Busan, and it's this massive field, right? But we get there, and I guess it's in the daytime, so there's not a lot of people, but there are like 30 people or 40 people coming up stage, and I'm looking at Rudy going, "Oh my God, is this what the audience is going to be like? Is this it? We flew all this way." So we go back to the hotel, we're laughing, go, "Screw it, we're going to have fun, whatever." So the buses bring us back that night. It's about 7 hours later, and we look behind the scenes, we open it up, and it's like 90,000 people, and we're like, and Rudy and I are just looking at it going, whoa. And you can, I mean, if you just Google it or just put YouTube, just put Impellitteri Busan, and you'll see the concert footage. It's insane. You know, especially when they pan out and you can see how many people were at the show. It's just unbelievable. And it's interesting, it also talks about there's no cultural divide in music, in metal, because I'm thinking, how many people even know who we are? You know, and yet they're singing every word of our song. And it's like, we did Somewhere Over the Rainbow, people were crying, and everybody was singing the melody. I'm like, whoa.
I mean, a lot of the groups I've interviewed over the years have played to huge stadiums and stuff, but it's always hard for me to like fathom what it must be like to have that kind of following and have that kind of energy coming back at you from the audience.
I think it's surreal. I mean, look, you could ask artists that are much bigger than me that do it on a consistent basis. Metallica, right? I mean, they're playing massive, 50, 60,000 people. Guns N' Roses, right? Slash and those guys. I mean, I've done it enough where I walked out on stage many times and there's 30,000 people like at a festival, right? And you see that and it becomes very surreal. There's no fear. There's no fear because it doesn't seem real, so you just do your thing. Not to mention the barriers in the audience are so far from the stage, you know, so you're looking down, they're about 30 feet or 40 feet after you get all the barriers, so it becomes very like, this is just a celebration of music, you know. That's how I view it anyway.
Your mom and your dad, how proud are they of you?
Well, I'll tell you, so here we go with the violins. I actually lost my mom and dad when I was 9.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was an orphan, so my grandparents raised me. They got to see a little bit of the music. Right before we were on MTV, they saw that part, and they really were proud. You know, as a matter of fact, that's why I originally called the band Impellitteri, because I owed them my life. I lost my parents, I had nothing, literally nothing, so they took me in, right, and they didn't have to do that. And they actually bought me my first guitar, got me music training. I mean, it was an incredible story, and I just felt so indebted to them. So when we were doing the band, I was like, well, what do we call it? And at that time, to be honest, perfectly honest, bands, you'd keep a couple members, and if a bigger band came and said, oh, that bass player's great, we want him, they jumped ship for the fame, and I understood. They wanted to be whatever. So I said, all right, if we call it my last name, which is horrible, by the way, as a band name, but if we do that, we know if people leave, well, then at least there's some anchor to the band, even though it is a band. So that's how it became Impellitteri, and it was, till this day, it's kind of like a homage or an homage or whatever to my grandparents as thank you, you know, to letting me do this.
I don't think it's a horrible name, because I think it was a name that stood out and it branded you.
Yeah, well, Impellitteri is very hard for people to say. I will say this, the letters and the spelling of the name, wherever I go around the world, people know, you know, it's funny, even my, so I have 2 daughters, one of them's a medical, one's a lawyer, and the older one is a lawyer. She came to me about a month ago, and she was, you're not going to believe this, I'm in this, and she does securities law, like works for, you know, like Goldman Sachs, the big banks. And she goes, I'm at this massive, you know, convention. It's all the lawyers, and these lawyers are coming up to me going, are you by any chance Chris Impellitteri's daughter or wife or whatever? And she goes, the name is just so, you know, it's one of those names where, yeah, I guess it's globally, it's gotten, not everybody, but it's gotten to that point where, people in certain markets, they go, oh yeah, we know the name.
When you were a kid, who did you want to identify with as a guitar player?
Losing parents at that age, I needed something. So, my grandmother got me my first guitar. At that time, my first concert, by the way, was Kiss. It was in 1976. I was 11 or 10. I don't think it was the Destroyer tour. I think it was Rock and Roll Over. It was right after that. And I saw that and I said, oh, I know what I want to do. What changed me on the guitar was hearing stuff like Van Halen. By that point, once I heard Eddie, I knew I wanted to be Eddie, and then of course I saw Randy. And so that stuff got me to the point where all my grandparents knew they were in trouble, because now there's no way I was going to school and all this. I just wanted to be a rock guitar player. So it was really Van Halen and, the first two Ozzy albums. Then, of course, there was Thin Lizzy. I loved Phil Lynott and Gary Moore. Gary Moore was huge. So all of those bands had a huge impact on me. I mean, big time. Where I became obsessed with music because of them.
The 80s were the time of the metal guitar virtuoso, essentially, and you were put in that category. That was a time when everybody was going, who's the next great guy that's out there? Who's going to compete with Yngwie? And there you were.
Yeah, listen, I'm humbled beyond belief. I mean, look, I know what it meant. I mean, when we were on MTV, it was 1988. MTV at that time, I don't know what their household viewership was. It was like something like 20 or 25 million people. I remember they flew me to New York. I was a guest host. I did their Headbangers Ball thing. We premiered Stand in Line, the video, with Graham Bonnet. And I do remember it changed my life a lot. It was like, for an infinite second, I started to understand what it must be like for someone like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise. Because you'd go out and everybody would be like, oh, hey, Chris. And you'd be like, this is kind of surreal. And even then, we were still nowhere near as big as Guns N' Roses or Metallica. But it gave us that ability. And the guitar thing, guitar is very universal. So for me, I play guitar because I love it. And for me, I've always looked at the instrument as it's my tool to express myself. So in the beginning, it was hard because everybody's just said I was an Yngwie clone or just wanking on guitar. And to be honest, to a degree, I see their point completely. But I looked at it as I had so much anger, rage in my heart because what happened to me as a child. I was frustrated. So you hear stuff like, especially our first, we call it the Impellitteri Black EP, songs like Lost in the Rain, Burning. I mean, that stuff was, you can hear the aggression in there. And the reason I'm playing all the real fast, articulate, Dimiola kind of stuff is because I was releasing that venting or whatever. So anyways, going back 360, this whole, being part of that Guitar Hero stuff, it doesn't suck. It's, I'm honored that people put me in that category with all those people.
Would you say your career has been a type of therapy, ongoing therapy for you?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, ask all artists. All artists know that we start with a blank canvas. And we start to create music, whether it's writing a song or writing a solo or whatever, but it does allow us to express our emotions, So for me, look, I mean, the parent thing, that's a long time ago. I was 9 years old, so I'm over that part. It's so many years, and I have a great family now, beautiful wife, beautiful kids, all that stuff. So I'm really happy, in life. So the music now, when I do it out of love, and it allows me, if I feel a certain way, it comes out through my guitar. I mean, that really is, at least me, that's how I express myself. I've heard some people say they have to force it, which I've never understood.
How did you achieve the success with the family? Because it's very hard in rock and roll to be able to sustain the wife relationship and then also sustain the mental well-being of the children.
The truthful answer, not the rock star answer, the truth is that the band has really had its core roots or its core audience base in certain specific countries. So being Japan, you go to Japan, you can't be over there for 6 or 7 months. There's not enough of the country to tour. So, you'd go over there best at that, especially in our height, maybe 3 weeks a month. We were getting paid, to be honest, it was pretty insane money back then. And I was smart. I had good accountants and everything put it away for us. So it gave me the ability to be a good parent, go on tour enough to satisfy our marketplaces. If we had to go to Europe or wherever, we would go do those dates. Then I'm back home. So very much a normal dad. Now I'm in a studio all the time, so the kids come in and hang out. But, I think that was part of the secret. Versus if I was on the road, I have friends, they're on the road for 3 years straight. Now, their families didn't last. I don't care how big of a rock star you are, whether it's the wife or the husband, eventually they're like, dude, this sucks. You're never home. It's not a relationship. So that was, in some ways, it's a blessing, at least for me.
You're getting dividends on your investment now. You have the successful daughters that you can go to bed at night and not go, oh my gosh, look at all the mistakes I made with my life.
Yeah, no, listen, I mean, my daughters are great girls. I love them dearly. We live in an area, we live outside of Malibu, so we live in an area with a lot of celebrities and the Hollywood lifestyle and all that, but they've never fallen into the trap. Because it is dangerous. I will be honest. It was a problem for me when stand in line period of time happened. You get a little bit of success and all of a sudden, all the girls want to be around you and all of that stuff. And I was doing that lifestyle for about 2 years, and I was really messing myself up as a guitar player, because instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing, which is playing every day and being disciplined, I was out at strip clubs, doing like the Motley thing. And at some point I woke up one day and went, no. This is not what I want to do. I want to be as good as I possibly can be on this guitar. So, that kept me grounded. And my daughters probably saw that. They saw that I wasn't, constantly, doing the party life every night. They saw the grounded part of me. So they embraced it, and thank God they got through it.
How old were you when you said, this lifestyle's not taking me anywhere?
I'll tell you honestly, I've made some really stupid mistakes. After Stand in Line, I remember doing a guitar video, and I was so high. I don't know if I'm sure it was prescription, because I certainly never did heroin or anything like that, but I was doing drugs, and I remember seeing it, and people were like, dude, you're just wanking. And I had to listen back, and I realized, oh my God, they're right. And it was a wake-up call. It was like a slap in the face. It was really painful as an artist. Look, you have people, when we do our best work, our fans are, oh man, you guys rock, we love you, you're the greatest ever. But then when we do our crap and we put it out there and you suck, you wank, you whatever, it hurts. But it's a good hurt. You realize, look, if you're gonna make quality music, you owe the people that listen to your music and yourself, right? You owe them to be competent. And so I realized there's no place in my life for the drugs and the excessive partying. Not that I don't like partying, I do, but not to that extent. So that was probably the wake-up call. And I'll tell you, I don't know if it was luck or whatever, but it was right at that point where I realized, no, my discipline is going to be music, 12 hours, 14 hours a day. And then Japan happened, and all of a sudden we started selling millions of records. And this is the time where heavy metal was dying in the United States. So we were going to Japan. It used to be a joke, because people used to go, oh, if you want to be successful, just go to Japan. Well, when we went to Japan, we were competing with the biggest bands at the time. So I remember I was on the cover of, there's a big guitar magazine in Japan called Young Guitar Magazine. And it was either me or Dimebag of Pantera. And I thought, oh, there's no way I'm winning. And they put me on the cover over Dimebag. Are you insane? So we realized all of a sudden we were now competing with Metallica and Ozzy and all the big bands in Japan. It wasn't the B level, and we were killing it. So, that to me was a blessing, to keep this, it's kind of allowed us to financially stay and keep doing this thing this far in our career.
It sounds like you kind of did the Sammy Hagar thing. After he got those checks from Montrose, went out and bought apartment complexes.
So my wife's father, his name's Bart. Bart's best friend is Sammy's brother. As a matter of fact, Sammy's brother was at my wedding, and I was like, remember when he came up and said hello, I'm like, what? Why are you here? So, we kind of know them. I've never personally met Sammy. I know Bobby, his brother, really well. So having said that, yes, I've heard he's very astute with his money. And look, we are musicians, and remember, they have that term, and I hate it, but it is the music business.
Yeah.
And you have to. Most people don't know I also have an MBA. So there was a period of time where I remember we were making records, and at night, I'd be bored out of my mind. So I remember Pepperdine in Malibu said, hey, come here. So I literally, and I remember it, and I've never met Duff from Guns N' Roses, but I heard he went up to Seattle, did his accounting degree or whatever. And I went, look, as long as I can play my guitar 8 hours a day, I'm down for it. And so I went and got my MBA, and I really learned business, which was cool. Same time, as long as it didn't hurt my guitar playing, that was the key thing. But yeah, so I get, bands that really, Gene Simmons is another one. I'm a guitar player first and foremost, but I do understand that you need a support mechanism to do this. There are plenty of times where we'll play shows in crazy out places where we're losing money, we're hemorrhaging. So where's the money coming from? Well, it's got to come from me. Where am I getting the money, right? So that's the reality. As musicians, we have to think about that at all times to keep the band alive and keep it going. Listen, I don't want people to think I'm Mr. Billionaire. I'm not by anywhere that. I live in a very beautiful, I've got a nice home. So I've got all that stuff. We're very happy. But, for me, again, it's like, the business means, how are we going to keep making records in the future? How are we going to survive? How are we going to reach new marketplaces globally? Because a lot of times, look, the money in some of our markets, it's great. But there are other times where you're going and you're virtually making nothing. And when you're bringing, if you've got 15 or 20 people on your road crew, you've got your flights, your hotels. If you have buses and all that stuff, where's that money coming from? So you have to strategize thinking that. So I'm always thinking, I've got people at work, business managers that help us. And of course, I listen to them. But of course, while they're on speakerphone, I'm,
Your 3 desert island discs.
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably easy. So Van Halen 1. Diary of a Madman, Ozzy number 2, definitely. And then this is where I'm going to get all musician on the musicians. It would probably be Friday Night in San Francisco with Al Di Meola, Paco de Lucia, and John McLaughlin.
Nice.
People don't realize, people always used to read me on the whole Yngwie thing, but the reality is the speed really came from those 3 people, really. And there was a guy named Jimmy Bell, who was a Connecticut guitar hero. Him and this guy, Jay Johnson. A little kid, I used to kind of idolize him in the clubs, but it was really Di Meola, McLaughlin, and Paco de Lucia, rest his soul. So those have been my 3 records.
What did you think of the Fair Warning album by Van Halen?
So again, I don't want to drag Impellitteri in it, right? But this is really important. People listen to our band, and the one thing I'm told constantly, even from other guitar players, they notice our band is always based first. The song is created by the riff. Has to be a great riff. I can shred all day long and do Vivaldi and all the technical stuff, but it's just masturbation if there's not a good foundation. And so with Van Halen, I learned that from Ed. So his first record, he's really on fire. Ice Cream Man, I'm the One. That's the stuff I love playing solo-wise. By the time you get to Fair Warning, now it's about those riffs and those hooks. Think about it. Sinner's Swing. There's nothing technical about it, but it's got such a gorgeous riff that you're like, dude, that is awesome. So I love that record. And I'm always going to love anything Ed did. I was not a huge fan of 1984. We started getting into that stuff. It was a little, it was not because the foundation was already don't go away from that, but it was still a great record.
But I want to ask you about Tom Scholz. What do you think of Tom Scholz?
I was probably 13 or 14. I worked in New London, Connecticut at a music store named Caruso Music. I don't know what grade I was in school, but I'll never forget this. They announced that Tom was going to come in personally because he was doing this thing called the Power Soak or whatever.
Power Soak.
Right? Or the rock. So he came to the store, and I made my grandmother drive me. I got there early, waited for hours. He finally came in. The store owner's like pushing me, going to say hi. And I remember I must have been this little annoying kid because I remember talking, going, Tom, I'm going to see you at the top. I'm going to see you at the top. And I'm doing stupid stuff like that. And he's probably just like, oh, kid, just go away. But I remember that. And so going back to your original question about what do I think of Tom Scholz or Boston, that was a huge part of my childhood. That first record, come on, man, the guitar tone. Yeah. He's a guy to this day, I'm a studio nut. It's funny. I had dinner the other night with a guy named Joe Barisi, and Joe's this amazing producer. Just did the new Tool record. He'll be doing Avenged Sevenfold pretty soon, and he knows I'm the same guy. I'm this gear guy, and I learned that stuff. Like, all right, what kind of mic pre should I use? Should I use vintage Neve stuff here? And all that initiated from Tom Scholz, because you realize when you listen to that, the orchestration, the layer, the tonality of what he did with that record, it's incredible. So Boston's definitely going to be a big thing for me.
I kind of hold him up on a pedestal to some extent. Like you were saying, I have a lot of mental real estate with that music.
Well, look, when you listen to that first Boston record, it's magical. It's just sonically, there weren't many records that sounded that good at that time period, right? Because I call it organic, where there's no samples, no triggers, but he was able to layer guitars, create this orchestrated part. When I say orchestration, kind of think like Brian May, right? With all the 1-3-5 harmonies and all of that and all the layers, triple tracking vocals, because even in Impellitteri, we do a lot of like the Queen style vocals where you do root, third, fifth, but then we triple track it, which means you do it once, twice, 3 times, then you do the third and the fifth that way. But Boston, they were doing all of that stuff with the guitars, the layers and all of that. So, it was kind of like reinventing the wheel. It was like, oh, we didn't know you could do that. And then we were on to where we eventually became with all the big production.
What do you think of the passing of so many heroes? We just lost Neil Peart. I think last year or the year before, we lost John Wetton, Greg Lake, Chris Squire. All of the fantastic people that we grew up with are passing away. What What do you think about that? How does that make you feel?
Well, you have to understand, look, this is part of life. I mean, there's someday I'll be dead, right? All of us we're going to go at some point, right? So I look at it as more of a celebration. I mean, what hit me, I think, harder than anything, really, was when we lost Pat Torpey, right? Because, most people don't even know Pat Torpey was the drummer in Stand in Line for the Impellitteri record, and he was such a good person, and he was also a driven musician, and so that was the first wake-up call, like, whoa, it's like mortality, wake up. Neil, I mean, look, I grew up listening to Rush. I used to play Spirit of Radio, 2112. I mean, in 7th grade, that's my band. That's all we played, right? So we were doing all of that stuff. But instead of being sad, celebrate it. I mean, look, Neil is going to be, people are going to hear his music 30 years from today. People are still going to talk about him in history books. I mean, this guy, to me personally, and some drummers may get mad, and I love all you drummers out there, but he was the greatest rock drummer in my opinion. He was the kind of guy where if he played, I didn't need to hear the bass or the drums. He could play drums, and I go, oh, I know that song, which means even though he's a percussionist, he's very musical. So anyways, instead of being sad, I'm celebrating, thinking, man, Neil, what he created, I can turn it on at any time. I can put on the CD player or, dating myself, I can, whatever, stream it, he will always be there. So he lives on. He's got that immortality, his music. So I think, to be honest, that's it. And, we know, look, I mean, we hear the rumors of a couple other people that may be going, and, it's going to be hard.
I'm talking about Eddie Van Halen, a pillar of my youth.
Look, let's hope, I pray to God, I hope Eddie is okay. Listen, I love him. I'm always going to be a fan of him. And what he did, again, look, he's 65 or something like that now. So look, he is same thing, someday, like I say, we're all going to go. It's like you celebrate that legacy. But yeah, of course, we're going to be depressed because it's also reminding us that we're going to go too. Look, when I was a kid, I saw Randy Rhoads play. And I remember it was, I forget the actual day or year. I think I was in 10th grade in high school. And I remember my buddy came up to go, did you hear what happened? And this is where crazy. And I told Rudy the story when Rudy and I were in a band, the Animetal thing we were in together. Rudy and I used to talk about this a lot because I saw Rudy play with Randy. And I remember I saw the first Blizzard of Oz tour, thought, wow, this guy's great. And he really had an influence on me. Then I bought tickets for Diary. And it was at the either New Haven Coliseum or Hartford Coliseum. So we were ready to go. My buddy comes in and goes, you hear what happened? I went, no. He goes, and he told me what happened to Randy. And I got to be honest, that did affect me. I was really depressed. So instead of celebrating his legacy, I was crying. I was heartbroken. It's like, oh my God, no. There's so much of a life there. But there's a big difference. And the reason I'm bringing Randy into this, at 25 years old, it's much too young. He had a whole life that was robbed of him. He should have had that life. Neil, again, he was only 3 years away from 70. I mean,
I look at his life and I think, this man did everything he wanted to do and then stepped away with his dignity, and Rush did it at the right time. They did it with honor. They didn't tell people, farewell tour, man. No way. It was like...
What we're talking about right now with these, again, these are rock stars. These are people that have had the greatest life ever. Look, I mean, I know at even my level, I am so grateful to be able to have the life I have. They're far beyond me. And when you think about what they've had, look, they've had millions of people worship them. What's the old saying? Guys want to be them, girls want to be with them. I mean, Eddie, he's had everything. He's had people like me worship him, spend hours, countless hours trying to figure out what is he doing, right? He's touched so many people's lives. So that's going to be a legacy. Same thing with Neil. Think how many great drummers have spent hours and hours just trying to learn his rudiments and how he played. And so, again, like I say, I walk out of this thing going, well done, dudes. Rock on. This is awesome. Instead of crying.
Chris Impellitteri, great having you. This is the Blairing Out with Eric Blair show with Chris Impellitteri. Signing off.
The Blairing Out Show.